Hi, I'd like to welcome you all this week to Imperial as One's Belonging series, Exploring the BAME Experience. I'd like to just take the opportunity to welcome Dr. William Ackah, who's a senior lecturer in the Department of Geography at Birkbeck University. And today he's going to give us some information about his intriguing story to where he is now. So, Will, I'd like to just ask you that first question, as is my normal custom. What was it that made you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in academia?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Thanks for the invitation today. Yeah, well, I grew up in East London, in Walthamstow. My parents came to the UK from Ghana in the mid-60s. So I grew up in London, went to school there. And so my original intention wasn't to be an academic. I always wanted to be a journalist. And so I went to school thinking, yeah, that I would write, and that was where my career would be. So yeah, school was fine. I grew up in quite a multicultural environment in London, and then went to university in Liverpool and did my undergraduate study there, where I studied politics. It's a huge culture shock moving from London, very diverse, multicultural, to Liverpool, whereas when my first undergraduate class, I was the only black person in a sea of 90 to 100 undergraduates. Yeah. So I did my undergraduate study there. And then when I finished my undergraduate study, I taught in Haiti for a year. I went to teach English there. Right. It was that then set me on a different trajectory. Haiti, the first independent Black republic in the Western Hemisphere. Mm-hmm. So as I started to learn about the history of that country, and then look at the current conditions when I lived there, the poverty, the development, the neglect that the country had really suffered over hundreds of years, then I thought that this was something that I wanted to study and think about more. That's what sort of gave me a burning desire to kind of think about the experiences of African descendant people around the globe. So in Haiti, but then also comparing that to experiences in Britain, to experiences on the African continent. So it was that then made me change, in a sense, from thinking about being a journalist to a more academic path.
It was seeing the conditions which then resulted in you having this almost like not a wake-up moment, but an internalization of social justice, if that's the right word. It was like an awakening. Why did you then choose to study the subject you studied, the PanAfricanism, and go more towards the academic route instead of kind of pursuing the journalistic route? Because both have power in highlighting a problem.
Yeah, I suppose it was so I suppose a slight conflict in relation to my values. Mm-hmm. So I'd grown up in quite a strict conservative sort of Christian environment. Yeah. And so when I was, backtracking slightly, so when I was kind of 16, 17, that's when I got deeply sort of embedded in that movement. But at the same time, I was developing a growing sort of political consciousness. Right. So I started listening to the music of Bob Marley, Gil Scott-Heron, who were talking about these ideas of Black consciousness. And Bob Marley had an album, Africa Unite,
Yep.
where we're talking about these ideas. And then also my dad, being from Ghana, would tell me a bit about Kwame Nkrumah, Pan-Africanism. So that sort of consciousness was growing, but with the religion that I was growing up into, they sort of observe like a Jewish Sabbath, so you can't work on Sabbaths. And so I was kind of feeling, well, I don't really think I can do journalism if I'm going to have to be reporting stories or things on the Sabbath. That career probably is not going to work for me. So those were the kind of ideas that were floating in my mind. And then I suppose when I lived in Haiti, it then sort of crystallized. Okay, I do want to think about these things, write about these things, but maybe like the academic pathway might be a better route for me to take rather than the journalism, because I didn't want to face those religious conflicts.
Right. Okay. So we're jumping around a little bit, but you said you were born and raised in London. Yeah. So you're a Londoner at heart. Growing up at the time when you did, what were your experiences of fitting in, of belonging? What did you experience during those times?
Very mixed. So I mean, so the school I went to was probably like a third black, a third white, and a third Asian. So we got on pretty well in the classroom and that level, and the neighborhoods in which I lived were quite mixed. So I wouldn't say that environment was then quite racist. It was quite a welcoming environment. Sometimes only later when you reflect back that you realize, wow, that there were some insidious barriers going on here, because I was quite good at sports in those days. And then so you realize certain teachers are pushing you towards athletics and these things. Like I say, in some ways, because my dad had a different take, he was like, no, you're not going in, come back here and get on with the studies. Kind of thing. And I even remember when I was doing my A-levels, those days, the UCAS form obviously wasn't online, it was paper. And you had to approach the teacher to get the UCAS form. And I remember one of my teachers saying, are you sure you want this? Is university really for you? Just to say, it's not for people like you. To go down that route, you should be going down another route. And in some ways you didn't, like I say, because it didn't feel like a negative environment, you were taking these things quite seriously, because you're thinking, oh, this is good advice. Maybe I should be listening to it. Because it was only, like I say, maybe some parents and other friends saying, well, no, you do have the capabilities to get into higher education. You should go.
So your parents were a big driving force, a major driving force in helping to keep you grounded, but also to give you the encouragement which you needed to go to say, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah. They certainly valued education highly, I think. And maybe again because they were restricted in that output, in that in Ghana, particularly my dad had been pretty well educated. But then both my mum and my dad, when they came to the UK, it was very restricted opportunities. They both were factory workers. And like my mum was a school dinner lady for all of that time. So we had a very humble working class upbringing. So though they had high aspirations for us in terms of their resources, that was a struggle for them to sort of provide those avenues and those ways for us. So I'm always very grateful to them, both for that inspiration and also for the huge sacrifices that they made in bringing us through those educational systems as well.
That's a really, really interesting point that you make, in that the sacrifices they made so that you could have something better, which is something which did you feel a pressure on yourself to achieve because of that?
Again, I think it's it's really interesting, I suppose. Yeah. So for people to sort of learn lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was like A levels was like the real big pressure. A levels and O levels.
Yeah.
At the time, that
Yeah.
you know, I had sleepless nights trying to get through those, because it was sort of drummed into me. They're the ones you need to get those, and then your life is really ahead of you. You know, not knowing anything different.
Yeah.
I really worked hard, I think, on those. But then when I got to university,
Yeah.
because of the people I hang around with, there wasn't hardly any other black people there or anything. I was
Right.
one of the regular people with my crew, and it was like, as long as you get a degree, it's all fine.
Yes.
So undergraduate level, I didn't really work.
Oh, William.
At all. Yeah, because that's what I knew. You know, well, you just get the degree,
Yeah.
and everything will be
Yeah.
fine. It's only later that then really brought challenges for me.
Yeah.
Because I ended up getting a 2-2 degree.
Right.
Not that I wasn't capable of doing much more, but like I said, the environment, that's what people were saying.
Yeah.
You
just need to get above a pass. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah.
So I'm gonna just explore this a little bit then, because now you're an academic. So I want to just kind of like pull you back to the idea of, well, you said that you were one of a few black students. Were there any black academics at Liverpool at the time, if you can remember back? Do you remember being taught by any lecturers or anything like that at the time when you were there?
So there was one in sociology,
right?
And there was one Asian guy in politics. So
right.
I started out my undergraduate degree in politics.
Yeah.
But then I just found it very dry because I thought it would be kind of, dynamic politics, like what you see on the news and that kind of thing, but no, it's very theoretical.
Yeah.
So then I switched to combined politics and sociology.
Yeah.
Like I say, I had one black lecturer in sociology, one Asian lecturer in politics, and then a supportive white lecturer who taught African politics, and that's where I got my best grades in those subject areas. so like I say, so where I was just average in some of the other ones, in those ones I was getting pretty high marks.
Yeah,
some of those people were then encouraging me to do other things.
That's interesting in itself. In just that, what was it that made you work harder? Let me rephrase it. Did you work harder for them, or was it that there was a greater encouragement from them to you, which kind of like then helped you to work harder, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think I found their subjects more intrinsically interesting.
Right.
In that I could draw a bit more on my experience to enter into those conversations and those discussions. Right. So, not that I would say did I necessarily kind of work harder in those, but maybe I read with more interest.
Right. Okay. Okay.
More
okay.
Interest.
Yeah.
Not that, and even those, not that those things were not unproblematic in some of those subject areas. Those were quite good, but I remember like some of my overall university experience, this idea, which has sort of come back to in my own academic work, of being an object of study rather than a subject. So
explain that a little bit for our listeners. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm studying, education policy, say.
Yeah.
And then I look in the book, or the teacher saying, black boys, they're 3 more times likely to fail at school.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at housing, say. Black people, they're more likely to live in deprived housing. They're more likely to do this. They're more likely to do that. Yeah. And it's like, and it's then you get, and what do you think about that? As if, what? You're talking to me kind of thing, as if to say, because I'm the only black person in the room. So
Yeah.
it's like, so that's what I mean. So you're the object
Yeah.
of what they're discussing.
Yeah.
But so they're examining features maybe that might have some
bearing,
tangible connection to your life, but you're being described and discussed in such negative terms that you just don't recognize. So it becomes quite an alienating kind of experience.
Yeah. And then if you're the only black student in the class, where did you go for your support network?
So in Liverpool, there were 2 universities. So I'd go to John Moore's, to the Afro-Caribbean Society there to get support, and made friends there. Because again, interestingly, although Liverpool had an African society, most of the students from that society came directly from the continent.
Right.
So there was a bit of a gap. We could share some experiences, but then there was a gap. Whereas the students at John Moore's, they were Black British, like myself.
Yeah.
We shared a lot more experiences.
Right.
A lot of those had also come from other cities to Liverpool. So we connected.
There was more of a connection with other Black British students as opposed to students who were African and Black, but had come, so the international students. So there was still a different experience for everyone involved.
Brilliant. Because those African students, a lot of them, they've been sponsored by governments, sponsored by NGOs to come. So it's very different circumstances. I was studying.
Were they roughly the same age as you, or were they older on average, if you can remember? Because that also will influence the dynamics.
So some were the same age, but quite a few were older.
Okay. So I'm going to switch it now from you reflecting on being a student to you now as an academic, right? And so the viewpoint of you belonging now as an academic within the academic arena. What kind of support, or give us an idea of what kind of challenges that you face, and how you've overcome some of those challenges?
Again, so the challenges, like I say, start then not having the right awareness and knowledge at the first degree stage.
Right.
So, like I say, I got there I went to Haiti. I come back. I can't do any funded master's programs because I don't have the requisite qualification to do that. Luckily, like I said, one of my tutors in African politics, because I've done very well in that, was empathetic towards me and took me on as a MPhil candidate. So I did an MPhil where I studied Pan-Africanism, turned that into a book, Pan-Africanism, exploring the contradictions. But again, lack of awareness and not being given the sufficient knowledge. I'm doing the MPhil. I didn't know there was such a thing as upgrade to
PhD.
To PhD. And then by that time, I'd gone so far into the MPhil project that I had to
complete
and finish with that. Tried to apply for academic jobs. Even though, this is the mid-90s, so there are a lot of people who didn't have PhDs and things then. I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get an academic position. So that's why I ended up then registering for a PhD. And I was working in a Black community college in Liverpool, probably the only one of its kind. It's closed now. And it was that gave me the opportunity to teach, start learning and researching about the Black experience. It was through that connection that I then started teaching part-time at Liverpool University, John Moore's, and then a place called Edge Hill College at the time, which became Edge Hill University. So then I got a temporary contract there. So I left the community college and went to work there. but then it was like a series of temporary contracts, temporary contracts, temporary contracts. And again, while my peers were being made permanent, I was staying temporary, even though I'd written a book.
And
published and done stuff. Temporary. So then I left Liverpool. My wife got a job in Bristol, so we moved. And so I left Edgehill and moved to Bristol, but I couldn't get another academic job.
So what did you do during that time there? Because you've established yourself there as you've got your. I know it was just a series of temporary jobs, temporary contracts, fixed term contracts. Now you've gone down to Bristol. What's happening there? What did you do?
So I ended up being an equality manager for the Learning and Skills Council, which was a further education funding body. I did that for a year, and then I worked at Bristol University. I was director of widening participation.
Well, okay,
for a year there, and luckily, at least with that job, they gave me the space to also complete my PhD. So
right.
The PhD took a long time, really. There were times I nearly gave it up. So then when I completed that, then that's what enabled me to get my role at Birkbeck.
Right.
And then when I moved to Birkbeck, so the first two contracts were again temporary. and then I got made permanent. Thankfully, changes in legislation and their capacity then to give me a permanent job. We became permanent. So it was a very round the houses route. To get into academia, and it has. And then what I'd say is then it has knock-on effects for how your career can advance. Because in the sense, when you're doing all these temporary contracts, teaching, then you're not able to like develop
your research area.
Research profile. So then that has knock-ons. And then you miss certain things. So when it's time to get the early career postdoc, you find you're out of time. When it's come to get this next fellowship, you find out later, oh, you needed to have done that 2 years ago or 1 year ago. Now you're not eligible. For that.
But I do know that you were successful in becoming a scholar. You got the Fulbright scholarship, didn't you? So explain a little bit about that and what process you had to go through, and what is it that what was it that you were studying, and what kind of implications has that study had on your own sense of belonging and also belonging within the community?
So let's go back slightly.
Okay. This is your story, man. I'm not gonna.
So I moved to Birkbeck in 2005, and that's okay. Again, I'm working on a community development project in East London. They want to set up a special series of courses, so we develop those courses and those programs. But then, unfortunately, tragedy strikes. My wife gets sick. And then she passes away in 2008. So that was very challenging period. So again, almost like your academic life falls. But then 2009-10, just when President Obama gets elected, started to read some books about Black churches and civic life in the USA. And so I get given a sabbaticals, extended leave. So I go to the US to connect with a scholar whose book had written. Who was a scholar at Morehouse College. So I go to the US to meet him, and I go to Atlanta, but he's not there. He's at his house in Indianapolis. but we talk on the phone and we make a connection. And then the next year he invites me. He moves to Chicago. So he invites me to Chicago to give a presentation. And whilst I'm there, himself, a South African guy, we start discussing about the Black experience and how issues of religion, race, and social justice can connect. And so from that meeting, we said, okay, let's run a conference, let's do some events.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, we then established a network called the
Yeah.
Transatlantic Roundtable on Religion and Race.
Yeah.
In a way, and that's what's been both in a sense, the savior of my career and given new blood and new life and energy into my work. So that network has now grown into a big international network with scholars, faith-based activists from different religions and faith backgrounds from across Africa, the Americas, Europe. We've hosted now probably about 7 or 8 conferences internationally. Yeah, produced different publications, edited collections, journals. Yeah, and I'm now the chair of that network.
Brilliant.
So really powerful. And then it's through that network that so my colleague Drew, when we were talking about, okay, how can we extend my work and the research? Then he said to me, have you thought about Fulbright?
Right.
Said, well, what's Fulbright?
Yeah.
And he explained it to me that he'd done Fulbrights before. So then I investigate and then apply to become a Fulbright scholar, and they must have been impressed with the work I was proposing to do. And then I think that must have been 2016. Then I got awarded the Fulbright Research Scholarship, and that was to research the impact of gentrification on African American church communities in Pittsburgh.
Right.
So I spent a year there, and then again, so I've turned that into work with my colleagues in the Transatlantic Roundtable, publications, and do ongoing seminars and series of work around those issues.
So with regards to, so I'm looking at it from a point of view of a progression. So whereas at the start you were talking about how there was opportunities which were missed because of short-term contracts, not being able to establish your actual methodologies or your research because you're always on these short-term contracts. But yet here, now we see an opportunity being opened up for you just because of I'm not going to say a chance encounter, but because of a connection which you had established, and then placing that opportunity in your path, if that's right. So the impact of that is multiple publications, right? A full transatlantic network, which I've had the pleasure of sitting in on, and it's very dynamic. How does that make you feel in terms of a sense of belonging, a sense of what's achievable?
Very empowered, very blessed and inspired by that network to kind of know that there is like an international scholars and activists who view their academic work as seeking to make a real difference, a tangible difference in the world that we live in. So all those dreams like I had in Haiti are now being realized in a very tangible and practical way, because this community is about empowering African descendants and other marginalized communities and using community resource-based knowledge assets to try and make a difference. So that community has given me a real sense of belonging and enabled me then to then pour back into Black British academics and aspiring academics and their networks and their work. Yeah,
that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant, William. Maybe I'm just nosy, and you know that I am. With regards to what's going on in the news for the past month and a half, well, there's this, when they say 2020, they're going to talk about unprecedented for the impact of COVID-19, but also the Black Lives Matter movements. What's your take and what's your opinion on those things, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, sure. As says, only history will tell us whether it will be a pivotal moment or not, or whether we've been here before. My take on it is that it won't be a pivotal moment unless this moment does bring about structural Black empowerment.
Mm.
So it can't just be about white people learning lessons about this moment in history and educating themselves about the Black experience. It needs to bring about material change in the lived experience of those Black people that have been impacted by racism. And that requires, like I say, structural Black empowerment. So that requires resources being put into Black communities, and into institutions that are going to use that resource to support and empower Black communities, not just to reframe their diversity language.
Right. Okay. I think that those are some powerful, and I know I've read a lot of your stuff with regards to reparation, but it's not just, I remember, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I remember one of the things which you were saying, which was related to kind of a thing which you said earlier on, which was when you came back from Haiti, you couldn't get on to do, say, your PhD, for example, because of one, the financial issues are related to that and those kinds of things. But it's also whether or not you had been given the value of your education whilst you had been at university in the first place. Had you been shortchanged? When you spoke of the lecturers saying, well, 30% of Black people are at the bottom of everything, right? So from that perspective, this idea of structural change, how would you envisage structural change being? Is it just taking down the statues? You lived in Bristol. Is it taking down Colson's statue or taking off other little things like that? Is that the structural change, or what really is the heart of the structural change which you think that we need to be pushing towards?
Yeah, for me, it's about, if you like, each institution or sector to look at its area, and like I say, and what concrete steps will it do to empower Black communities. Brilliant. So let's take higher education.
Yeah.
We know from the work of Leading Roots and the Broken Pipeline report that, for example, Black students are not accessing the funded PhD.
Yeah.
So my thing would be, you've got to set aside a certain percentage of PhD scholarships and make them available to underrepresented groups. You've got to block off concrete resources and not just do it for 1 or 2 years as a diversity initiative. You've got to be doing it for 20, 30 years. It's got to be structural. So you're creating pipelines for Black academics to move through and enter into the system. In terms of within universities, again, a lot of talk about, well, how come there's no Black history in schools or this and that kind of education? Then you need to create funded Black research centres, you know, and fund them permanently. And empower Black academics and others that want to engage with those issues to be able to work from those centres, so that they begin to produce that knowledge, produce that history that then comes out into textbooks, that comes out into popular culture. So it's those kinds of things that you want to see. You know, public institutions that we pay taxes for, and again, the classic example is the BBC. Yeah. They need to set aside specific funds that say, you know, that this work is dedicated to Black programming. This work is dedicated to enabling, to having Black producers, Black directors make programs and be a part of the system. Because we know that if you don't structurally do that, if you don't deliberately do that, then it doesn't happen. Because you just have the words and the initiative. We have this ambition, we have this target, we have this, we have that. Yeah. So we were talking about that 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're still talking about it today. Yeah. And we're talking about it in another 30 years.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, you know, it's got to be a kind of structural, targeted
Yeah.
empowerment. Otherwise, pulling down the statues just becomes a symbol. In a way, the statues come down because we have full awareness and fully cognizant that what has happened to us in the historical experience has been negative, and those things, it still impact us today. So fix the substance first, and then in fixing the substance, the other things hopefully will take care of themselves.
Brilliant. William, you know, I can ask you questions all day long, and I you know that. So what I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to open up and see if anyone else has any questions which they'd like to ask. And if not, then I'll ask a couple more. So is there anyone who's got a question that they would like to ask Will? If you want to put your hand up, then I can. No? Okay. I will carry on with the question.
Is there some comments in the chat?
There's a comment in the chat where Sarah has said, totally agree, we need to ring fence resources until such a time that the true equality means that we no longer need to take this action. So I'd agree with Sarah with that point there. And then we've also got, that's the main one. Oh, I think the situation with your temporary contracts, really shocking. You know, the fact that it took so long to secure a permanent contract.
Yeah, and I'm not. Yeah, and I'd say I'm not alone in that.
No.
Yeah. There are many people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds who experience very similar kind of things, and then, like I say, it really stunts your capability to have that kind of academic advancement. You talk to other people and they'll tell you, you know, from undergraduate to funded masters, PhD to funded postdoc, to academic career. Whereas, you know, for a lot of us, that just wasn't our journey.
It's been a much more roundabout kind of route to get to where you are.
That's why I'm so critical as well of mentoring. You know, just get a mentor, and that will solve your problem. I wouldn't say to somebody, well, do what I did. That's the route. That's the route to academia. I said, no, go on. Maybe go work in the city. You'll go do something else. Mentoring is not a solution to structural racism. Structural empowerment is the route to ending structural racism.
It's very funny that you should say that, because virtually every person who I've interviewed, I wouldn't necessarily say to anybody else looking at the route that they've come to say that's a really good route to follow. Everyone's has been so diverse and so different. So it's not one panacea which will work for everyone. Everyone's got their own individual route. I see two hands. I see Moonlee and I also see Hector. So if we go to Moonlee first and then Hector can come in after that, please.
Hey, William. It's nice to see you today. Now it seems like the tables are turned. I'm asking you questions. I think like I'm trying to link up my, my interview last week and combining what you're saying about, I think this is a really good case of, again, like cultural capital, where, even having a job in academia takes you such a long time. And it's just ridiculous that, even to get a job, you need to be in a good position to get a job, People need, and I feel like people don't appreciate when they go to study or when they try and, do a PhD or trying to live up in academia. People don't see that socioeconomic disadvantage that, you just like, just do a PhD and you're sorted. It's not that easy. So I think to hear your journey, it's so I think it's just, it's just very inspiring, I think. Sorry, that's not a question.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no, yeah, I understand. What you're saying, and because we live in a false meritocratic society, the society is not willing, in a way, to take that into consideration, and we really see that, I think, playing out in the COVID scenario, where there's almost like, on the one hand, there's an acknowledgement COVID is impacting BAME communities more than it's impacting others, but then rather than putting structural measures in place, they say, yeah, let's research, let's ask more questions. Whereas I am saying, well, no, you can see this is having a detrimental impact on this community. Take these communities out of the front line, out of the firing line. Acknowledge this has an impact on one's material existence, one's mental health, and do something to support. Don't just speak good words, but then don't do anything. And I think that's, in that sense, Moonlie, I think, yeah, that's what you're kind of saying, that our journeys, what's happened to us, has an impact on us. So why is that? But that's not factored into, is it, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to the jobs you can go for? You just have to go in like everybody else, even though you've been materially disadvantaged in the past. You still got to compete on the same level. And in fact, sometimes you've got to be better. You've got to prove yourself better in order to even be seen to be operating equally. And that, to me, seems to be a material injustice.
One question I do have, how do you, what you have experienced, and yours is quite a lived experience, it's not like from a textbook that we read, has that impacted your teaching or how you deal with students?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think then you are knowing the kinds of experiences that your students have had, then yeah, you try to be empathetic. I suppose spend a lot of time one-to-one counselling and dialogue and sharing with students. Indicated to Wayne, so I also run with another colleague a network for aspiring PhD students and PhD students from across London and the UK, bringing them together to enable them to talk about their experiences and to get the kind of advice that I didn't get when I was going through that process. So yes, those things do happen. Let me just shut the window so this doesn't come in.
Hector, I believe you've got a question for us. Moonlie, thank you very much for your questions.
Yeah, hi William. It's been really nice to hear you talk. I'm another academic at Imperial, but what I was interested to ask you about was a little bit more about your experiences growing up in London. I'm another Londoner, so relate very much to what you were talking about. And I just wondered if you'd like to say a little bit more about whether you think that experience of growing up in London at the time you did, does it present a unique experience compared to other kids growing up and down the country? And, in the changes that you've seen in the city, and you now work and teach in the city and teach kids from all over, the changes that you have seen evolve, how do you feel about them in terms of attitudes and outcomes for Black people?
Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because when you're in London at the time, you don't think of that as being unique. But I think when I went to Liverpool, then I really realised how unique it was, because I think there was a report called the Gifford Report into Liverpool where it says that racism in Liverpool was uniquely horrific. And I think, yeah, the value of London, like I said, of growing up in that kind of very rich multicultural melting pot of having friends of all different backgrounds, was invaluable, because it was almost like natural, so after school I go to my Muslim friend's house for dinner, or my Hindu friend.
Yep.
and we would all mix together and talk. And so you'd learn about these cultures, not in an artificial way, but in quite a natural way, because you were friends and you were interested in each other's lives. I think part of the changes that sort of seeing in London now is whether that kind of natural cultural mixing is coming under threat from increasing gentrification, and that as more poorer communities, minority communities get marginalized out of kind of central city spaces, then that kind of diversity gets undermined. And so then that could be a sort of a threat to that kind of multicultural engagement that I experienced in London. And I think you see that also with the types of schooling. So again, my school was okay. It was a general comprehensive. It did educate me, but now I suppose we're seeing much more increasing kind of separation of schools, almost like the creation of de facto grammar schools and de facto lesser schools based on postcodes. And if that kind of segregation continues, then I think that does undermine that kind of, like I say, that multicultural melting pot mix, not just in terms of the socializing, but then also then the trajectories of those people and their careers and the things that they can aspire to. Because for me, I don't think it's an accident that, in a sense, knife crime, gun crime has kind of risen in certain communities in the age of austerity. As the spaces for certain communities get smaller, their sense of belonging in the city then also gets narrower. That's why we start to talk about postcodes as opposed to being a Londoner. And that, I think, is a difference that we need to take cognizance of and be wary of, and try to initiate policies to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you, William. That's really interesting. Thank you.
Brilliant questions. I've got, someone was just asking William, what are you a professor in, right? I know William's aspiring. He will be a professor soon. That's my challenge to him. But William, just tell them again what it is that you work on, just as in a summary for us.
Yes, so I'm program director for community development and public policy, and it's housed in the Department of Geography at Birkbeck. So they're the courses that I manage and teach on.
Brilliant, thank you. And William doesn't blow his trumpet. He is a really fantastic writer. I go to him for advice. Trust me, he is superb. And I'm telling you, journalism is the poorer for not having someone like William championing the causes which he is so passionate about. I just want to ask one quick question, William, right? If you were advising your younger self, and I'm gonna specifically go back to yourself when you were going through those days at Liverpool University, what advice would you give that younger self?
Wow, yeah, that's a hard question. yeah, I think I would tell myself, actually, live your best life in the era that you live in. And probably, don't second guess yourself. I think part of the thing is that when you're faced with new environments, new circumstances, the temptation is, and I think that was part of the temptation, that you make your world smaller.
Right.
So you're confronted by a whole white society. When you're confronted what seems like racism, then you might retreat then into my church culture or into this kind of community culture.
Yeah.
Actually challenging the broader culture and fighting for one's rights as a citizen within that culture can broaden your horizon. So if I was speaking to my younger self, even though that might have been challenging, that was probably the thing I would have wanted to have done more boldly.
So live in the now, be your authentic self in the now that you're in. and don't become constricted because you think other pressures are on top of you.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
and that's why I'm quite excited when I see like the young people that are in universities now, isn't it, that are fronting Black Lives Matter, that are fronting decolonizing the curriculum, because they're saying, this is our rights. This is what it means to be British in the 21st century. This country is ours. So if these things are offensive to us, we need to point it out. We don't just sit back and say, oh, okay, let me go in this corner and chat about it over here. Let's bring it out into the broader society.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. William, you know that I always love having a chat with you, and it's been no exception today. It's been absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much for coming in and for giving us your belonging story. Okay, I'm going to just do my normal promos for what's coming up, and also announce a new initiative that we've got, a new issue that we've got as well. So I'm going to just quickly go back here. So for next week, we will be having Rudy Page, and he's a transformational specialist and skills facilitator. And he was one of the originators, or one of the individuals behind Imperial, the setting up of Imperial as one here at Imperial. So he'll be our guest next week. But just before you go, I also wanted to highlight to you that, we now also have a belongings page, a belongings YouTube page. So all the interviews which we have done so far can be found at the URL at the bottom of the page. So tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO, sorry. So if you want to check that out, any interviews which you've missed, you can catch them up here, and I will be uploading Williams within the next couple of days. So thanks again, and I'll see you again next week for the next in our Belonging series, exploring the BAME experience. Thank you very much.